Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us. My name is Ola Tamanova, and it's my pleasure to welcome you at Ukraine Media Center today. Today we have invited you to discuss quite an important topic. We are going to discuss the admission campaign 2025. Joining us in the studio is Mykhailo Vynnytskyi, Deputy Minister of Education and Science of Ukraine. Good afternoon, Mr. Mykhailo. Thank you for having me. And I would like to start our conversation with the preparation stage. We understand that the preparation is in progress. So what is currently the phase of it, and what are the specifics of this year's campaign? Thank you very much for the question, because just yesterday during the meeting with the minister and with the deputies, we were discussing everything related to the admission campaign, and we have quite good news. Specifically, this year, we have the same figures of the registered applicants. I mean, those who signed up for national multidisciplinary tests. So basically, the figures are identical with the last year. In fact, we're going to expect additional registration for NMT that is going to last within this week coming, and the figures may even grow. So last year, the number of applicants, those who signed up for NMT, was 312,508 persons. And this year, it was even difficult to imagine 312,498. So basically 10 people less. I mean, when we talk about 300,000, that's not even a statistic error. That's almost an identical number. And again, the numbers are expected to be growing even without the additional registration session. And it's good news. And it means that all those talks circulating in the media that the applicants refuse Ukrainian higher education, that the applicants enter the higher educational institutions abroad, that we're losing best of the best, well, probably such talks have something behind them. I'm not going to say otherwise, but the figures definitely demonstrate a different tendency. It demonstrates that today Ukrainian higher education is competitive, is desired by the applicants, and 292,000 applicants who signed up in Ukraine, plus 20,000 who signed up for NMT from abroad, demonstrates that we have 55 centers for NMT in 34 countries, and respectively, those applicants who were forced to stay abroad outside of Ukraine will still have an opportunity to enter Ukrainian higher educational institutions. Well, you've mentioned the additional registration sessions, so when are they going to happen? Well, now we are on a technical stage. You know, those who haven't made it due to some reasons, they still have time to sign up during this week. That's the final stage. But again, those numbers that I've mentioned just now, they exclude that additional potential number. I think that it may grow about 2,000. So we expect about 312,000 applicants this year, and it's really good news. Okay, so what are the peculiarities of this year's campaign? Maybe there are some novelties we should be aware about. Well, basically, the novelties were implemented last year. We remember that last year there was an increase of NMT up to 4 subjects. This year it's 4 subjects again. 4th subject is optional, and 3 are mandatory: Ukrainian language and literature. I apologize. Well, and history of Ukraine. And the small novelty this year is that there will be additional questions on Ukrainian history related to the King's Age. Last year it was only starting with Cossack Age. Well, you know, it's important for us political not to give the ruse to our enemy. This narrative is really valuable for us to preserve it, and the applicants are supposed to learn that part too. But I have to emphasize that basically we're talking about the 10, 11 grade curriculum. But again, there may be different questions related to the King's Age and Cossack Age as well. And when it comes to mathematics, there's a lot of discussions in the media whether the creative and art professions, they need mathematics, but it's about access to higher education, which means that the people who are applying for higher education should have finalized full secondary education, which includes not only arts or only sciences, but the full range. Again, talking about numbers, this year, out of those 312,000 applicants that I've mentioned, 114,000 picked English language as a fourth optional subject. More than one-third picked English, 72,000 picked geography, and a little bit less, 62,000 expressed their desire to pass a biology test. That's for medics and medical specialties, and Ukrainian literature is for humanitarians. 46,000 of our applicants, and obviously other languages were represented too. However, there are some matters of concern. Chemistry and physics are being picked by a rather small number of students. Physics were picked by 88,000 and chemistry by 2,100. 8,800 and 2,100 respectively. And you've asked me about the innovations. Probably this novelty will not cause any effect this year, but hopefully it will produce some effect in future. The applicant rating is growing for those applicants who are picking chemistry or physics as an optional subject. This is how we want to motivate our 10th graders who are going to proceed to 11th grade this year, or 9th graders who are going to pass NMT within 2 years. We want them not to forget about chemistry and physics. Passing them, it will be easier to enter higher educational institutions. Well, what about the budget seats? We don't have a specific rating, like a threshold, 120 points threshold for budget, but you are going to ask about some specialties probably with 150 points rating required. But again, when it comes to medics, lawyers, those specialties which are incredibly important for our everyday operation and existence, like medicine, and those specialties that we see as in demand in the society, like lawyers, the threshold rating will be 150 points. So when it comes to the focus of attention of the government, how does it match with the requirements of the labor market? Well, look, what do we mean saying the focus of the government? It has such a tool as focusing of applicants' attention, and it's funding. Basically, we have two ways of budget financing of traditional education. First, it's a government order and the grants. The grants were implemented for the first time last year. This year we continue this system, and shortly it will be legalized rather than just be implemented by the resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers, which is going to stay in effect this year too. And this is where we come to state grants. There are certain ratings that encourage the students to pick specialties which are in demand by the state, or those that will be in demand in the labor market. For example, we're talking here about engineering specialties, and the biggest number of grantees were in 5 specialties related to computer sciences, such as software engineering, computer sciences, cybersecurity, applicable mathematics. So the 5 specialties that for which the biggest amount of grants were allocated. Also important for us are agrarian specialties, everything related to infrastructure, because we need to reconstruct our country. And we don't only have to reconstruct and recover our country, but also to recover our human resources potential. Significant amount of grants were allocated last year for psychology, therapy, and rehabilitation are in the focus. A lot of budget seats are allocated for that specialty. So basically, everything related to recovery of human resources, human capital, medical specialties, psychology, and infrastructure, everything related to construction, architecture, engineering specialties, everything's in focus, always in focus. A large number of applicants are still choosing management, law, economy. The labor market is oversaturated with the specialists in these specialties, and we don't expect the situation to change shortly. So my advice to the applicants is always to think twice whether you want to be a lawyer, or probably you may be curious about politology or philosophy, or you're not going to use the 4 years to achieve your career goals, but rather for overall development, because human capital is about our brains, our development as the subject, as the personalities, as the young people. So in fact, we are switching the emphasis a little bit in terms of our vision of higher education, which is not only about preparation to the labor market, but also about the development of human capital, which is usually developing in non-practical specialties. Well, medical specialties will be still a priority, but arts, general humanitarian sciences may probably become a good substitution for economy, management, and law, which were traditionally this so-called, well, these were traditional called traditional specialties, and we have a lot of applicants who don't find themselves in life after graduation. Well, quite an important topic, our applicants abroad at the level of the state and just at the level of the society. We're fighting for them to come back to Ukraine. But if we consider the example of the last year, have we been able to make it, and what are the plans for the year coming to intensify this strategy? Well, definitely we have a need for the young people to come back from abroad, but again, is being balanced by the fact that Ukraine shouldn't become a prison for the young people, and we've made huge leaps to improve the academic mobility of our bachelors. And as you know, in the beginning of the year 2024, there were certain changes made to the rules for crossing the border. If people participate in academic mobility despite their age, but within the age category of 18 to 22 years, the bachelors have a right to cross the border in order to study like 1 semester in Poland or Germany or Great Britain or France or any other countries of Europe. Some may even leave for North America, and it's really good because it gives you a broader view of the world. A large part of those staying abroad are currently coming back to Ukraine. Why? I keep hearing it from those who use the academic mobility and those who left at the age of 15 or 16 years and are entering the higher educational institutions now. Well, the quality of education abroad leaves much to be desired, and by what we see in Ukraine, I know it may be unpopular. We keep saying that Ukrainian education should catch up with the European level, but our best educational institutions, higher educational institutions, are not only competitive, but they attract as a magnet those who are staying abroad. And it's been corroborated by statistics. Year to year, we have a large number, like 20,000 is a pretty large number. That's the number of people who pass NMT from abroad, and then they enter higher educational institution in Ukraine, because there is no reason to just write an NMT if you don't want to enter a higher educational institution in Ukraine. However, a large number is still staying abroad, and they study in remote mode is applicable in the cases of those higher educational institutions which are located closer to the front lines. For example, those located in Kharkiv, Sumy, Zaporizhia, Odessa, in fact, are those cities, and Dnipro as well, are those cities which remain in the dangerous area, so to say, which means that a lot of students study on a remote basis and still staying abroad. They still pick Ukrainian higher education over those offerings they get in Europe, and it's a good tendency. Well, in one of your interviews, you've mentioned that the educational exchanges, like some number of our students are staying abroad. So what is the number? Well, in fact, that's not such a huge number. I probably put it in a little bit wrong way. I think that the percentage of those coming is a pretty good number. It's more than 80%, and now this number is being corrected because there are some who are staying for the summer and are coming back by, say, September. According to our statistics, they are coming back late, but still they're coming back. 83% are the men who were using the academic mobility to leave and then to come back in a timely manner. It's a good figure. We have to understand that. Again, I want to emphasize is that the attractiveness of the higher education in Ukraine for those who have some basis for comparison, for those who understand what is it to live in Poland, what is it to study in Germany or in other countries, they still choose Ukrainian higher education, and this is something we should take pride in. Yet another important block is the admission campaign for the youth who ended up in temporarily occupied territories. We've heard about a lot of problems this category of our youth is facing. We've heard a lot of experts who were visiting our studio who were saying that the special programs need to be developed for those children who left the temporarily occupied territories, who come to us, and they have to adapt, they have to undergo some expedited course of Ukrainian history, Ukrainian language, everything that they were not taught as they were staying in temporarily occupied territories. So what is our policy here? How do we stimulate our youth to enter higher educational institutions here? Well, let's be frank. The best stimulus to bring our youth back home is going to be the solution of the security situation and our victory. And until it comes, let's not accuse ourselves of doing something wrong. Unfortunately, people ended up on the other side of the front line. It was not their will, and we take all the best efforts to make sure those people can study in Ukraine. Obviously, they cannot come here to pass an NMT, so they are being accepted without NMT. We've created dedicated education centers, Crimea, Ukraine, Donbas, Ukraine. This is what they are called, but in fact, we're looking at the trained people in the admission commission of every higher educational institution who can check the documents, who can do the things to make sure those people can enter higher educational institutions. Sometimes those people can't even get Ukrainian passport, and we're looking at the special regime for identifying or verifying the identity of those people, or the identity may be established based on the birth certificate or other documents. So basically, it's not a problem. All those problems for their admission are already worked through. Unfortunately, the figures are becoming less and less year to year. Why? Because first, our citizens are being persecuted in the temporarily occupied territories. We know the stories when the professors in Melitopol, in Berdyansk, who tried to continue teaching in their universities that were relocated to Zaporizhia, they switch VPN on, and the FSB is knocking on their doors, and they end up in a real bad trouble. So our citizens keep being intimidated on a regular basis in the temporarily occupied territories, just like in occupied Autonomous Republic of Crimea, and in order to physically come to Ukraine, you have to go through 9 circles of hell through Russian Federation. Some people are coming through Finland, some are using other ways. So it's really, really difficult to do this physically. So the problem, it does exist, but it's more of a problem that is resulting from the fact that those territories are occupied, and Russian authorities really don't support our citizens studying in Ukrainian university. Just the other way around, they are being tempted frequently to study in Russian universities. And for those citizens of Ukraine who come to the territory under Ukrainian control, there is a procedure which allows us to verify the results of the education that were obtained there. Obviously, we don't recognize any diplomas or certificates issued by terroristic organizations of DPR or LPR. We don't recognize those papers, but still the citizens of Ukraine should enjoy certain preferences using their competences that were obtained this or that way. There is the procedure already in place. We are just starting to test it, and during this admission campaign, I hope that we are going to have certain amount. I'm not going to give you an exact forecast about the numbers, but there will be some citizens from the temporarily occupied territories who will enter our higher educational institutions after their results of previous education will be recognized. Thank you. Well, now we're getting an impression that the professional technical education is developing. A lot of emphasis is being made there to make sure that the children pick this way too. So this year, how is it going to happen? What are the steps that we are making to continue this pace, to keep up with this pace, so to say? Well, we've covered it a lot of times, and we are going to continue covering those improvements in the infrastructure of the professional technical education. There's a lot of investments coming that way. We see improvements of their material base. And the situation is pretty much the same with the colleges. When it comes to the colleges, if before the full-scale invasion we were witnessing 42–45%, depending on the regions, applicants of the colleges then applying for entering higher educational institutions, now this number is significantly reduced. This number now is about 25–27%, even smaller in some areas. So basically, those who finalize their secondary education, incomplete secondary education after the 9th grade, they proceed to the professional technical educational institution, and after graduation they don't continue studying in higher educational institutions, but they still make it, finding themselves in life, either going out to the labor market or joining the armed forces of Ukraine. So for those who were trying to find a specialist who works with their hands, somebody of the working profession like welder or a turner, there is a huge demand for such specialties. I'm sure those people are going to come back to higher education, but now the youth come into the labor market from the professional technical institutions is a good news for the labor market. They are in demand, and last year we had 20,000 more applicants to the colleges rather than standard number all around the country. So basically the number was doubled compared to the previous year. So I think that the figures are going to grow within the years coming. So when I'm saying about 312,000 who signed up for NMT, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are all going to enter higher educational institutions. So I'm not going to make any forecasts. I will better operate the numbers when I have them at hand. But a large number of the specialists picking NMT are going to pick the professional technical educational institutions rather than higher educational institutions in future. Thank you, dear colleagues. Do we have any questions on the floor? If so, please let us know. Yes, we have some question. Good afternoon, Stanislav Svaritsa, Suspilne News. We're having a question. When it comes to the order of the Ministry of Education and Science 1112, is about the resolution that was made on the 7th of August 2024 during the meeting in the Office of President, as Irina Vershuk is reporting that the Ministry of Education has taken a pause to develop a more progressive solutions. Now is the end of April, and the Office of the President is stating about a lot of complaints coming from the territorial communities. Well, we're probably having different calendars. Today is 22nd of April. The new solutions are being developed. Yesterday there was a big meeting with the minister, with the deputy ministers. So this matter was discussed. I'm in charge of the higher education, so I'm asking you not to comment on the secondary education issues. And if there is a need, it will be my pleasure to share the contacts of my colleague who is in charge for the secondary education for the schools. But again, I would like to emphasize that the solutions are being developed, and we will definitely comply with those deadlines that were set, specifically the end of April. Thank you very much. Do we have any more questions on the floor? Well, I'm having a question about the master's degree. So what is the specifics of obtaining master degrees now? Well, thank you. I've even brought some dates for the masters, and you've reminded me that I wanted to share that information. So now the registration is continuing for the unified admission exam for those specialties that contemplate this exam. It's not contemplated for those for all of the specialties. So respectively, it means that the testing will be taking place in the end of June, in the beginning of July, until the 12th of July. And we will have the results announced on the 18th of July. As we all know, this year, just like the last year, the admission for a master's degree contemplates the state exam, one exam made of the so-called general competencies test based on the American GRE test, which is used for post-bachelor education admission. And some may be laughing that it's like a logic test, the test for logical thinking, analytical thinking. There are texts that you are supposed to analyze logical schemes to solve, but it's not related to some specific specialty. So it's a test to verify that people are able to continue studying, because bachelor degree is one thing and master's degree is a high level. And also this test has a section dedicated to the foreign language, and we understand that the higher is the level of education, the more important is the knowledge of foreign language. So on the 18th of July, the results will be announced, and we're seeing that in July the admission cabinets will be opened for those applying for master's degree, and the system is absolutely identical. There are applicants for bachelor degree who have their electronic accounts, and they are being established for applicants for master degree, and there will be the digital accounts, digital cabinets for those applying for postgraduate degree. But again, just like previous year, postgraduate degree will be only on a budget basis, but for extracurricular study, it will be contract-based. If the last year we had about 7,000 applicants, this year our forecast will be about 5,000 seats for postgraduate education, and obviously the advantage will be given for engineering specialties and for the natural sciences. Those are the innovations that we really need in our education sectors. So what are those changes related to? Well, last year 7,000 was really a lot. There was really a rush last year. It was mostly related to, I would say, to the postponement rather than with the real desire to obtain a postgraduate degree. There was a lot of publications with different numbers. So again, this year the number of applicants will be way lower. And we want to make sure that those who want to create innovations, who want to write scientific papers, so they have their places at the postgraduate crowds. But in order to avoid the situation when the postgraduate degree is used not as it's intended, so we changed the numbers. Well, thank you very much for your attention. Let me remind you that joining us was Mykhailo Vynnytskyi, Deputy Minister of Education and Sciences, and let me also thank our security and defense forces, thanks to whom we can continue having events like this. Thanks everybody. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes.